Hello traders, today BlackRock has launched a Bitcoin ETF, and in honor of that I'm going to show you guys a tool that tracks all Bitcoin buying selling activity in ETFs. Let's get into it. So this is from ByteTree. Everything that you're going to see is completely free, but if you guys want a lot of alpha like this and also private alpha, you can click the link in the description if you want to check out my Discord. So yeah, now let's get into what's going on here, because I think this is one of the better indicators, especially if you want to invest in Bitcoin or looking for more long-term holding or trying just to time when to buy or sell. So if we go here, these are all the ETFs. You can see it's Canada, America, and European ETFs. And if we look here, these are the 7-day cumulative inflows and outflows. Now what this means is this is how much Bitcoin, and money are going into ETFs, and how much Bitcoin and money, how much Bitcoin are coming out of ETFs. So when we see a large increase of Bitcoin in these ETFs, that means that investors are very, very bullish. Now, when I say these investors, this is not everyday retail investors. A lot of the people who trade these at these sizes, where we're talking thousands, if tens of thousands of Bitcoin, are very large institutional investors who are going to be moving the market. Okay, so when we look here, let's go look at some patterns that I have noticed. Perfect. In here, you can see the Bitcoin price in blue, all right? And then we can see the inflow and outflow in green or red. Now, let's interpret some of these. You can see a very strong increase in inflow right before the big pump. That's not a coincidence. That's pretty much a lot of institutions buying up Bitcoin, and it rises. Okay? Then you can see a lot of them bought it, and then we went to a high, and then they began to sell it off. Once this turns red, that means that in the last 7 days, when back when this data was there have been more people removing their Bitcoin from ETFs, which is bearish. Okay, so when you see this turn red, it's typically a pretty bearish signal. When you see it turn green, it's typically a good time to buy. So you can see this turned red, and then price began to fall. We went up, we went down. You can see some inflows happened, a few thousand Bitcoin, and price went up. Then look what happened the very second that this began to fall and go red. Bitcoin went down as well. You can see some investors tried to, on this consolidation phase, some of these investors tried to get back into Bitcoin, but then they all ended up dumping it right here. So I would say the best way to use this is any dramatic fall in the Bitcoin inflow, basically. That would probably be the best indicator. Something like this, where we went from 7,585 Bitcoin inflow to an outflow of 5,500 Bitcoin, or when we went from 7,000 inflow down to 3,000 Bitcoin outflow. That's a 10,000 Bitcoin difference in like a week or less. This was 6.2 to 6.8. So in 6 days, 10,000 Bitcoin were sold off / removed from these ETFs. And then you can see a very large drop in them in the outflow right here. But then the Bitcoin came right back, and that was a very good buying signal. But now let's go more granular, because this is probably how it's best to use it. Is something like the 6 month. Okay, so on the 6 month, a very clean signal was right here. This was when more institutions and ETFs were onboarding Bitcoin, were allowing Bitcoin, than outflow. And just to jump to present, today a lot of people probably bought Bitcoin because BlackRock's new ETF, so I wouldn't be surprised to see this increase by a lot. But you can see basically here, a lot of Bitcoin flowing in is a very bullish sign, and then Bitcoin went up, and then as Bitcoin went up, we could see some outflow, Bitcoin fell, and then this was this is a bit interesting. This sell-off from 23 or whatever down to about 20,000 and lower, that could have been just from Bitcoin ETFs. If you look at the data here, it going from negative 1,644, and then 1 day later, yes, 1 day later, it went to negative 11,000. A lot of Bitcoin were sold off from the ETFs here. And then you can see we went from 11,419 to 5,000. This is a very large jump in people in institutions buying Bitcoin. So really any large decrease, it's typically better to sell, because in the short term, price tends to keep going lower when ETFs sell their Bitcoin. And whenever this increases a lot, it's a very good buying signal. And just following this has led to very good trend signals. So basically knowing when the market's going to trend up or down, essentially. You can also use this on a different cumulative. I prefer the 7-day, but some people might prefer something like the 30-day, especially if you're going farther back in time. So if I go to the 2-year for the 30-day, you can see some very clean signals here. It increases and then decreases around the market top. I still prefer the 7-day though, but this is one way you can look at it. Then finally, let's finish with the 3-month. Right? Yep, the 3-month here. You can see it looks like price has been pretty steady in the last 3 months. But let's go look at Bitcoin on TradingView, because that's going to be much better. This is exactly 3 months of time, so it's starting from around, what is that? Starting from around the 1st of March. This data is starting around the 18th of March. So it didn't really, okay, and there we go. Now the data is starting from 18th of March. So yep, so we can see here the market high was April 14th. April 14th was, not surprisingly, when we had a lot of inflow into Bitcoin from ETFs, as you can see, these fund inflows. The other time when there was a lot of Bitcoin being inflowed into institutional hands was March 24. Let's go look at what price was doing March 24. March 24 was a local high, but not really anything too special. Bitcoin was at 28K. And then Bitcoin fell on March 28th. And March 28th, not surprisingly, this is when the funds began to sell off. So yeah, I mean, there's two ways you can trade this kind of data. You could trade it from going from red to green or green to red, or you could trade it, probably a better way is any large drop off of institutional fund activity. This is a pretty strong selling signal. This is a pretty good buying signal. So around the 21st of March, 22nd of March, it looks like, yeah. So right after this price drop right here on the 22nd of March, 21st of March, this would have been a good time to buy right after the price drop. How would you have known? Well, if you see just a ton of institutions buying up Bitcoin as price dumps, that could be a sign of weak-handed traders selling to institutions and ETFs and funds, which is probably a good time for you to buy. Then when you see this strong sell-off, which happened around the 4th month, which would be April. So April 18th, April 19th, April 20th. That looks like a pretty good time to sell. And guess what? That would have been selling right here at the market top. Super, super simple indicator, but I'm 100% going to be using this more often. You can see other signals here. So a lot of Bitcoin was being sold off in funds on, June 6th. So a lot of Bitcoin was being sold off around this whole area, and price did go down. And then recently, let me see how granular I can get this. It hasn't updated for today, for the 16th. This is just updating to the 15th. I think down here we can actually see it though. Yeah, you can see all of the ETF activity, the total. There's been more inflow into Bitcoin, so it's turned green again. So I am thinking that Bitcoin's likely going to be quite bullish. But yeah, you can see this right here. Heavy inflows have tended to be bullish, and heavy outflows tend to put selling pressure on the price. Because what I think happens on a sentiment point of view, and that's how I'm going to end this video, I think that when a lot of funds and ETFs onboard a lot of Bitcoin, people see that as a very bullish thing. But when a lot of ETFs start selling off their Bitcoin, I think because they're the top dogs of the market per se, or among the top dogs, when they begin to sell, I think that can encourage a lot of other people to sell as well. So I think that heavy inflows can be very, very bullish, and heavy outflows can be very, very bearish. You can look at the 30-day, you can look at the 90-day. The 90-day probably not going to give you anything helpful. It's looking at 90 days average of inflow and outflow. It's just not going to give you anything. I'd recommend just doing the 2-year 7-day, or just like the 3 or 6 month 7-day, because you get so many good signals here of when to buy, when to sell. Again, this is more of a spot trading thing and not really probably trading futures or options, because this seems like it would give very good trades when you're trading just more like, should I buy Bitcoin? And if Bitcoin's doing this, then yeah, you probably should. So that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed this institutional deep dive into ETFs and funds. Yeah, I'm going to link this in the description below and see what you can do with it. Happy trading.